Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Elev8 podcast. I'm so excited you have joined us today. Today's guest is Dr. Michael Gervais. He is a high-performance sports psychologist. He's worked alongside some of the MVPs in almost every sport, Fortune 500 companies, works a great deal, and has co-founded the company Compete to Create with Coach Pete Carroll of the Seattle Seahawks. You can find that on social media at Compete to Create. He's also the host of the Finding Mastery podcast, where they dive deeper into high-stakes performance with his guests. You can find Dr. Michael Gervais on Twitter and Instagram at Michael Gervais. You can go check out his website as well, findingmastery.net. Let's dig in with Dr. Michael Gervais. Being around all the great things you have personally and professionally with athletics, what are some of the greatest sports memories that you have?
Obviously, the easy answer is there's been so many. And anytime you're in the presence of people who have extraordinary talent, who have dedicated their lives to run to the edge of their potential, and then the courage and vulnerability to go for it, to not know the outcome, to stand in the presence of a real challenge, and to test themselves together with either their opponent or their teammates, there is incredible experiences that we get to witness and be part of. And for me, some of the obvious standouts are the highlight reels of extraordinary men and women I've been able to work with, like Felix Baumgartner jumping out of, a capsule at 130,000 feet when some of the brightest minds in aerospace didn't know when he passed through the sonic boom if his arms and legs would stay intact. I mean, it's an incredible demonstration of skill and courage and teamwork, because nobody does this alone. And, Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks and Coach Carroll, and watching him and the team create that culture and the experience of people within it to pursue their very best, their collective best. Surprisingly, the second Super Bowl that we went to, where the outcome wasn't what we hoped for or planned for, that was one of the extraordinary moments for me, to look down the sideline right after the game that ended in a dramatic fashion, where we turned the ball over on the half-yard line in the fourth quarter with just minutes to go, and to look down the sideline and to see Coach Carroll's response. And the response was hands on his knees, head down for 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and watch this radical transformation from gathering himself to feeling the emotions, the loss of that event, and having his head come up. And you could see the transfiguration within him, that he processed it, he felt it, and now he needed to be there for his team. It was an incredible moment for me to see that expression of leadership and knowing all of what it takes to be able to capture that moment in the way that he did. And then, obvious easy highlight for me again is with the beautiful time I've been fortunate enough to spend with four-time Olympian Carrie Walsh Jennings, and watching her be able to dominate in a world-class fashion and see the commitment of both mind and body, as well as craft, be able to be tested at the highest level. And so those are the types of experience that I walk away as a different human by being in those environments and working deeply with those men and women.
Excellent. So you got you're on the podcast, and through some of those interviews on your podcast, if there's a specific episode, great, I'll link that up. But is there anything that jumps out from a podcast that, man, I really learned something from a guest in that experience?
So the Finding Mastery podcast is really an examination. It's like a postgraduate class for me. And it's an examination and understanding of the most extraordinary and courageous men and women in the world. And each podcast, each person is highly qualified and unique in their own right to be able to talk from an authentic standpoint about what it means to organize one's inner life to flourish. And not just to flourish in their chosen craft, but to flourish in life. So there's two parts of mastery of craft and mastery of self. And the ones that stand out for me are the men and women who have tested themselves personally and professionally, have been kicked in the stomach, punched in the mouth, so to speak. They've felt the pain that comes with the courageous vulnerability to go for it. And they pulled themselves up together, either by themselves with their community, and have resurrected, if you will, and found a new way of living. And I'll send you a list of folks that I think are extraordinary, but the ones that stand out to me right now are the head coach for the Warriors, Steve Kerr, and the experiences he's been through at childhood and how he's come to organize his life and his team to win multiple championships. The CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, and coming from deep poverty and where he grew up to running one of the most significant tech companies in the world, and his arc to do so, and the epicenter of his approach to leading the industry. Not lost on me is that, somewhere around 200,000 people report up to him. Is the center of his approach is empathy.
Right on.
John Donovan, the CEO of AT&T, who's a massive tech company as well, and how he came from humble roots into being one of the more significant players in media. And his central aim is to help people be better. And that's a deep commitment. It's not just words on a wall for any of these men. It's a deep commitment. And so that when they get tested with stress and pressure, their philosophy is true. And those are the men and women that, that we want to follow. There's plenty of other folks. Abby Wambach was an amazing beacon for obvious talent, being on the USA women's national team for a number of years, but a true commitment to helping young women find their very best and to do their very best and to create an ecosystem for that to take place. And so I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it's been an incredible collection and community of men and women who can articulate how they've organized their life to flourish.
Excellent. You kind of, in that answer, mentioned the, mastery of craft and mastery of self. Kind of on the mastery of self part, I work with a lot of high school student athletes in their teenage years. What's a simple, effective technique that you like to teach athletes just to reduce anxiety or stress?
Well, anxiety is a mental disorder. And so I put that word disorder in there to remind us that this is a psychological condition. And so true anxiety is very different than anxiousness, and it's very different than pre-performance jitters or nerves. So if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it in a way that we can have a roadmap depending on which of those three we're talking about. So if we're talking about clinical anxiety, a person whose inner life is hijacked by the fear of the future. And so there's two types of clinical anxiety. There is cognitive anxiety and somatic anxiety. And you can have an interaction of both. Cognitive anxiety is a chronic, persistent, pervasive, overwhelming thought patterns in our minds about the future not being able to work out well. Somatic anxiety are the physical sensations that we feel when we're nervous and anxious. And those are manifested in heart pounding, shortness of breath, temperature escalation, and a whole host of other body sensations that are related to a pervasive nervousness about the future. Okay, so what do we do with those? Well, clinical best practices, clinical measurements, and science would suggest that cognitive behavioral training, CBT as it's known, which is a whole branch of psychology, is a best practice. Medicine is a best practice. Medicine alone is not recommended. So CBT plus exercise, plus helping other people, plus mindfulness, plus high quality nutrition. So those are kind of the five best practices for helping with clinical anxiety. Now, if we dive into CBT, cognitive behavioral training, which is what my training is in, that there's a whole host of very mechanical skills that we can use. And these can also be used in the pre-performance nervousness that some athletes feel. And so breathing techniques, and so it's called arousal regulation, which means understanding how your body and thought patterns are relating to your appraisal, fancy word there. Your appraisal is basically how you're determining how you think you match up to the challenge ahead of you. And so arousal regulation is really being aware of your body sensations and how to manage those. And when I say body sensations, I'm talking about heart rate, I'm talking about breathing rate, I'm talking about tremors, slight tremors, little nervousness tremors on our hands. And the number one tool when our body switches on and we don't like how much it's switched on is breathing. And so breathing, a long exhale, is paired in our brain with safety. It sends this instant signal up to our brain, like, we're okay. We've got the luxury of taking a long break, a long breath. Okay, so, but if the first time that you say, you feel a little nervous and you say, okay, I'm going to take that long breath that Mike talked about or that my coach talked about, you're not going to be very good at it. Right? It's like, it's not going to be very powerful.
Right.
And so that's why we call it front loading. We get ahead of in sport, we call it front loading. We front load the training to get ahead of it. What is it? The challenge. So on a regular basis, a daily basis, good science is suggesting somewhere between a minimum of 8 minutes a day of breath work to really be able to have some command over that skill. So that's one way, and that's super simple. The other way is to become better aware of your thoughts. Okay, so once you're aware of your thoughts, thoughts turn into thought patterns turn into habits of thought. Once you have a habit of thought, it pushes down into the non-conscious because you said it so often, our ecosystem says, oh, well, we don't need to attend to that anymore. Let's just make it a pattern that's below the surface. So the game inside the game is to become aware of thoughts. Once we become aware of thoughts, we can change our thought patterns to be high-performing thought habits and patterns. Okay, so that's mechanical. You can obviously figure out that, and there's a whole course that Coach Carroll, head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and I that we built called Compete to Create to actually train you how to do this work, so you're not left on your own. Sure. All that being said, it begins with awareness. Both of those, arousal, regulation, and cognitive skill training begins with awareness. So that begs the question, how do we increase our awareness? Mindfulness. One of the two pillars of mindfulness training is awareness. Awareness of what, you ask? Awareness of thoughts, emotions, body sensations, and the unfolding environment around you. That's pillar number one for mindfulness training. If we stop there, you'd be a better performer, but you would miss pillar two. Pillar two is wisdom. You can't read about wisdom. You can't buy wisdom. You have to reveal it. And how do you reveal wisdom? By being fully connected to the present moment and your experience in it. And that's how we earn wisdom.
It's great stuff, Michael. You mentioned in there, Compete to Create. Can you talk a little bit about that, what you and Pete have done there, and kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Heading to our first Super Bowl, Coach Carroll, we're in the hallways of the training facility and in Seattle. And Coach Carroll is in the hallway, and he's got this really great energy about him. And he says, Mike, can you feel what's happening? It was a couple months before going into the Super Bowl. And I like nodded with big eyes and a grin, like, yeah. And what he was talking about is having some of the most alpha competitive humans in the world pointing their noses in the same direction. And that is an incredible thing to experience, let alone cultivate, which what he has done.
Yeah.
And so what he was talking about is his part of his genius is creating an environment and an ecosystem for people to do their very best work. Then my skill set is for those that are hungry to explore their potential to help show them how to train and condition their mind. So you take 1 and 1 and it equals something far greater than 2. And so he says, hey, let's just write it down. Do you think anyone out of sport would be interested in this? And so I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And he says, let's just write this down. So we wrote it down. We started sharing those ideas with those collective shared practices with business leaders. And Microsoft was our first client, and they helped us go from a small room of 25 people to 2,500. And now we've been with them. We've trained over 40,000 people at 8 hours per person inside their organization, and they helped us build a scalable model. And that scalable model, beautiful, working with one of the great tech companies in the world, that scalable model is now, for the first time in the last handful of 12 weeks, is available to everybody. And so you can find those same practices, techniques to organize your inner life to flourish and to recover on a regular basis through that company. We're incredibly excited to introduce it to folks.
Definitely. It's great, exciting stuff. I look forward to it.
Thank you for letting me talk about it. It is a true passion.
Yeah, it's something I want to definitely dive into and learn from as well. And kind of, you talked about Pete a little bit and some of the people on the podcast. What are some of the common denominator qualities that you find with people that are great leaders of other people?
The authenticity that is required to be a leader of others is central and a theme across those that are able to sustain that position. And it is not something that you determine you're going to be a leader. That's not how it works. You don't say one day I'm going to be a leader. Is that there's this organic experience that happens first within. And that organic experience is a mission, a idea of how you want to organize your life. And then if we herald the extraordinary leaders and athletes and put them on a pedestal for the outcomes that they've achieved, whether it's the championships or the medals or whatever, we miss the fundamental thing, which is what you're asking about, which is we should not herald them for what they've done, but how they organize their daily life.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is it's an authenticity that is consistent. And the way that we go to develop a consistent approach to life is to have very clear principles that guide us. The shorthand for that, we call that a philosophy.
Yeah.
So to be very clear about what are the guiding principles that line up your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Those that can line up their thoughts, words, and actions across any environment are incredibly powerful humans. How do they do that? One, you got to know what the guiding principles are. Okay, nobody can give those to you. You can borrow Buddhas and Confucius or Jesus or Muhammad's or Malcolm X's or fill in the blank. We could keep going.
Sure.
You can borrow those incredible leaders. Mother Teresa. She's got an incredible philosophy that we can all benefit from in modern times.
Sure.
Okay. The second part is to be able to establish what is my mission, what is my purpose, what am I doing in my life. So to work on that, and purpose in life has three components to it. One, it's got to matter to you, meaning whatever it is, got to be important to you. Two is that it has to be bigger than you. So it's something that is larger than you're able to accomplish alone. And the third is that it's future-based. It's down the road. Like my purpose is, it's not like I'm going to establish all of my purpose today. I can have a mini mission today, snapping hopefully into a larger purpose in life. And then we develop the mental skills to be about it, even when it's hard. And what are those mental skills? We can train our minds to be optimistic, which is at the center of mental toughness. We can train ourselves to be calm and confident and deeply focused in the environment. And each one of those has a unique skill underneath of it. And so those extraordinary men and women, they know what they're about, they have clarity of their purpose in life, and they've conditioned their mind and their craft to be consistent in high stakes environments. That's it. That, though, is available to all of us.
Sure. It's good stuff, Mike. So we kind of talked about it, and you brought it up earlier. I wanted to bring it up. You touched on some of the best athletes and people on the planet, but I want to go off the planet again and talk a little bit more about being a part of the Stratos Project. I think it's just like you mentioned. I think the courage, the unexplored, all the factors that come in. What was that like for you and to work alongside him?
There was a moment in that project where I'm sitting in mission control and I'm in the back of the room, kind of tucked in the back there. And I'm looking around at some of the most extraordinary thinkers in aerospace. And these men and women that committed their life efforts to explore and to see if this could actually happen. This was not a stunt. This was a real mission in people's lives.
Sure.
To see if the human body is capable of surviving through the sonic boom. And I'm in the back of the room. It's launch day, and I just feel this. We're all exhausted because there's like these windows of time we're trying to navigate with wind, and it's like a 2 a.m. shutdown and a 6 a.m. wake up to try to capture these moments in time for wind and preparations. And we're exhausted. And I'm sitting back, exhausted with adrenaline. It's a weird combination that happens in these types of environments, and flooded with this gratitude to be included in this extraordinary mission. And I can feel, there's this moment where I could feel this fatigue and adrenaline, and my throat swells up, and behind my jaw is swelling up, and I feel this pressure behind my eyes, and I'm just sitting by myself, overwhelmed from the fatigue, and feeling so grateful to be part of this extraordinary commitment to the edges of the human experience. And, to be included in helping Felix, and this is all public, I'm not talking about anything that's, breaking my oath here to the craft of psychology, is that to help him work through a very intense fear, to be able to have command of his mind in one of the most hostile environments in the world. I learned so much from those men and women on the team, from Felix included, and just incredibly grateful to be part of that experience.
Awesome. So, one of the things, I live out here in Colorado, and I'm an avid hiker. I like to get out in the mountains and ski. And I think the mountains teach me a lot about life, about who I am, about, different things, the challenges they present. I know you like to get out on the ocean. Can you tell me, if you had to go back and tell 16-year-old Michael one truth about life that you've learned on a surfboard or out paddling in the ocean, what has the ocean taught you?
Oh, geez, the ocean. Okay, two questions. What did I tell my 16-year-old self, and then what has the ocean taught me? The ocean has provided, I think, one of the greatest learning environments in the world. Mother Nature. We could extrapolate the ocean to Mother Nature as one of the greatest teachers. When you make a mistake, the consequences are often swift. They tend to be harsh. And sometimes, they're not incredibly dangerous or consequential, but there's instant feedback that comes when you make a mistake in natural settings. So it is an incredible place to learn how to become a tuning fork for what's true. And there is a space between hesitation and commitment. And if you pause in that space between hesitation and commitment, you get injured. Mm-hmm. Or you could, and so you learn about self-reliance. I learned about self-reliance, about becoming a tuning fork to what's true. I learned the importance of being able to be well prepared, because surfing, for example, you get, maybe 3 waves come in every 8 minutes, 6 minutes, and there's like 40 people competing for those just handful of waves.
Yeah.
So if you're not properly prepared, you don't get a chance. And that's in life too.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't properly prepare yourself to be in the present moment and to have the necessary skill, both from a craft perspective, your physical body, as well as your mental capabilities, if you don't have those skills in place and the opportunity presents itself, it is missed. Mm-hmm. And so it teaches about preparation, fine-tuning to what's true as a calibration method. And then the feedback is swift and sometimes harsh.
Excellent. Last question. Always like asking this one. I never got the same answer twice. But how do you define success?
It's a great question. And I think that question is changing. And the reason I say changing is because when I first grew up, many people talked about, 2 different types of success. And, there was the monetary external success, and then there's the internal levels of success. Mm-hmm. And I think that in recent times, we've lost our way a little bit as a culture.
Sure.
And it has been influenced by technology and comparison media. Everyone's got an Insta highlight reel of how their life looks. And so success, while no one would talk about it publicly, success was marked by your perception and your status of who you are in your peer group. Sometimes peer groups are small community-based, and sometimes peer groups are global or international. So there has been a trend that has been very stressful for people trying to figure out how to operate in modern times with the advent of comparison, ease of comparison. So how do I define it? The way that I define success is increasing the frequency of me living in the present moment. And so success is a growth arc that is based on my physical, technical, and psychological skills to be emotionally available and skilled to adjust to the unfolding, unpredictable, unknown. That is always the present moment. So success for me is marked by living in the present moment more often. How do I know when I'm doing that? So I mark success, internal success, by being snapped to the present moment by the science and expression of awe. And so awe is this intersection between experiencing the grandiosity of the moment and also experiencing the singularity of the uniqueness of this small moment in time. So there's the grandiosity of it, and at the same time, the intersection of that this is a fragile moment that I'm in. And so when that happens, you'll recognize the expression of awe. Your hair stands up across your body. And the nerd in me wants to tell you what that technical term is. It's called philoerection. And so philo meaning hair. So your hair stands up. And, so I measure success by how many times I can get my hair to stand up, which means that I've organized my life and trained myself to have the capabilities to live in the present moment. Now, for me, being in the present moment, I want to be right at the edge of my capacities. And so that means I got to find and organize my life to do challenging, difficult, scary things that require vulnerability and the courage to stay in it when it's difficult, to be aligned to my principles that I talked about earlier, my guiding principles and my philosophy. So I don't know if I explained it well enough to you. It makes perfect sense to me. And the short answer is that how many times a day can I get my hair to stand up?
Yeah.